Hi there, it's Mark here from High Rise Digital, and I've been working on a project recently and was working on something to make it more extensible, something which I bang on a lot about in the WordPress community about extensible development. So I thought I would just show you how I have made a little bit of code more extensible, and maybe you can learn something about how you might want to write your code in a more extensible way. So just to clarify for those that don't know, extensibility means making your code expandable, editable, and so you can work on top of that code without necessarily breaking it. So let's have a look at the task in hand and what we had to do. So this is a project we've been working on recently. This is the designs, and I'm talking today specifically about a very simple part of this project, and we're looking at the footer here. So in the footer we've got on the right hand side, we've got 3 social icons. We've got one for Facebook, one for Twitter, and we've got one for LinkedIn. Now this is a relatively straightforward, obviously, implementation. So somewhere in the WordPress admin side of things, we need somewhere for this particular user to set the social profiles. So we've done this in many ways in the past, but we thought we'd give this a go in the customizer. Now there's a reason for that, in that we didn't really have many settings for this site. There was only a few, so we thought stick them in the customizer. That might be good rather than creating a whole interface in the admin side of the back end. So we're going to use the customizer. Now obviously the designs have Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. So I'm just going to jump over to my code editor here, and you'll see that this is some of the code that we could use. So if you've never worked with the customizer before, which is relatively new to me, I have to say, this is the code that would add a Twitter URL. So obviously you'd do this for each of the URLs that you wanted, so the Twitter, the Facebook and the LinkedIn. So we create a new function and we hook it into the action of customize register, and this function gets past the WP customize object, which has a lot of methods on it for interacting with the customizer. So one of those is add section. So we add a new section for this called social. So when you open the customizer, one of the panels on that section, I shouldn't use the word panels because that's something different, one of the sections on there is called social, and it's got a little description. We then add a setting into that into that section. Get the terminology right. We've called this the setting APCTV Twitter URL. We've set a default value of empty. You could have a default in there, and we've created a callback to sanitize the string. In this case, just sanitize text field. That might not be the best one to use actually. And then we've got to add a control for that setting. So the control is the UI, the input UI that controls that setting. So in this case, we're just using a text input. I'm not so sure whether it supports a URL input. It might do. And I've created the same ID as this one. So this control controls this setting. We've said it's a text input. Which section is that appearing? It's going to appear in the new section called social, which is set up here. That should be the label that's shown, so that'll be like Twitter URL, Twitter link, Twitter URL, I'll put URL. And then you can add a description here, so add your Twitter profile URL. And then what that does, that will add that into the customizer and allow the person to enter that particular detail. So what you'd have to do is you copy these two here twice, more for the other 2 that were in the footer. So we've got the 2 extra ones, and then we've got this is the code that you'd sort of use in the theme footer. You'd say get me the theme mod for the Twitter URL. That would then this variable would then store whatever they've entered in as the URL. You'd then run through a little, if we've got a value, then we'll spit this out in some markup. You might want to do an unordered list, etc., that you might want in there, and that works absolutely great and it's fine. But with my extensibility hat on, I was thinking, well, what happens in the future if the client says, actually, we've started to use Instagram and we want to put the Instagram in the footer? You obviously would have to jump in here and just copy all this code again, or you could make it extensible. So I want to show you how I have made this slightly more extensible so that it is much easier in the future to add additional ones or remove them. So here we go, have a look at this then. So in the theme here, I've got a customizer.php file, which I'm just going to open up for you. And what I've done is I've started off by creating a function that will get all of the social profiles that have been registered. So the concept here is that you register a social profile, in this case Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and then the code that I've written kind of handles the rest. It creates the customizer option in the back end, and it spits out the markup on the front end. So I'll show you how I've done that. So the first thing is we create a function that gets any registered social profiles. Now, as you can see, this is just going to return an empty array by default. And we've given the filter a name called APCTV Social Profiles. So at the moment, if I just code that without this code below, it would return an empty array. So the next thing is to fill it with the default social profiles that I want to use, in this case Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. So these are just an array of options. So I'm going to first add the Twitter one. I'm going to give it the ID, which is the ID in the customizer that it's going to use, the label and description as we saw before, and the priority. The type it is text, the default value which we saw, and the sanitize callback which we saw as well. Same for LinkedIn, and then the same for Facebook. And then I'm going to return that array. So this is all hooked in to the social profiles filterable array, which is up here. So once this code has ran, this array now populates with these 3 items. Other plugins, other themes can also add and take away items from that array. So that makes it very extensible if another plugin comes along and wants to add an icon into the footer. So moving down here then, this is then where we register the customizer settings. So instead of just registering the sort of the sort of hard-coded settings here, what we're then doing is we're saying, right, get me the registered social profiles. So this variable now contains this array of our 3 registered social profiles. And then what we're saying is if we have any social profiles, then what we want to do is we want to add a section into the customizer to store those profiles in. So this is the social profile section. So we've got a new section when the customer loads on the left hand side that says social profiles. Once we've registered that, we can then loop through each of the social profiles that are registered. We can add the setting and the control for that social profile. And the variables here are basically pulled from what we registered up here, and they're set here. So the type, priority, section, label and description, we set them all from what we registered them in here, which is good. So they get registered in the customizer. So if I jump up over here and go to customize, this code's actually running on the website. So you can see I've got social profiles. If I click that, I've now got my Twitter, LinkedIn and my Facebook URL. Just to give you a hint there, if I just comment out the Facebook one, oops, wrong button, that one, and press save, and then reload the page over here, what you should see when I click on social profiles, we now only have 2 because I've not registered that particular part of the array. Excuse me. So that's that bit. Now, the next bit then is the actual output of that in the footer. So because this is now extensively written, if I go into the footer one, we've got some stuff about the rest of the menu here, but the bit that's important starts here. So rather than just saying, get me the Twitter URL, if we have one, output it, get me the Facebook URL, if we have one, output it, what we can now say in here is just get me all of the registered social profiles, which is exactly what we did in the customizer file. So that's this bit here. If we've got any social profiles, let's open an unordered list, because that's what we want to store our list of social profiles in. And we're going to loop through each of those profiles, and then I'm storing the key here as social profile name. That's the array key, which if we just jump back over here, that's the Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook bit. And we're going to store the array in social profile. So social profile now contains this array here and this array here, etc. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get the value that has been saved for that particular profile. So get the theme mod for profile link. If it's empty, the link, then just continue in the loop to the next one, because we don't have that particular social profile to add. So we'll just run on to the next one. If it's not empty, then we're going to come down here and we're going to output a list item. I've given everyone a class of social profile item. And then I've given everyone a class of social profile item dash dash and then the name of that profile. So for Twitter, this will be dash dash Twitter, dash dash Facebook, dash dash LinkedIn for the others. And then we had a link item in here, which just does a href attribute to the actual profile link, which we set up here. That's the URL that the person entered into the customizer, making sure we've escaped it. And then similarly with the profile name here, I've made sure that that is output as well. We'll probably obviously hide that with CSS and use the class to output the icon perhaps. You might want to span in here to do like a font icon or something as well, but that's up to you. So that's that. So the great thing about this methodology is that if we want to add a new social profile, we don't really have to mess around with any of this sort of markup here. So let me just give you an example. So up here, I should have a file called debugging, and I can just stick in an example function. So I'm just going to say example social profile. Oops. And then this function, because I'm going to hook this into the filter, this function gets past the profiles that have been registered. So I'm going to say add filter, and then I'll have to remember what the filter name was, which was there. And then we're going to hook in this function, and we'll hook it in after everything else, so a priority of 20. And we're going to pass one variable, which is this profiles variable. Now, if you're ever working with filters, I always find it really super useful to always return the filterable thing, in this case the profiles array, because if you don't, then everything just breaks. So I always do that before I do anything else, return the variable at the bottom, so that's done. And then we can add our new profile. So the easiest way to do that is just to come over here and copy one of these, like this. And I'll stick that in there. So let's do an Instagram one. So Instagram URL, enter your Insta is probably a quicker way of doing all this. Someone's going to tell me, and that's fine. So this one will be priority number 40, so we'll put it at the end, and then we can save that. So now if I refresh this page, what we should see is that in the social profiles, we now have another one called Instagram. And if I just stick a hash in there for now and publish, we now have another one on the bottom of here as well. So all I had to do was add it to my filterable array, and it automatically handles registering the customizer object to put it in the customizer and automatically outputting that on the front end of the site. So I don't need to worry about any of that. So a client comes to me in 2 months' time and says, oh, Mark, we want to add this. It's a simple job to do. So something to think about to make something really extensible. Now you could take this even further. So for example, in the footer file here, we could have, for example, in here, we could get the social profiles, and then we could pass those to a template, and then we could make the template filterable. So a plugin could add its own template to then override this one. All sorts of stuff you can do in that as well. But I just thought it's an interesting video just to show you how, with relatively less, not much more code, if you like, you can make something really extensible so that you can change it really easily. Hopefully that was nice and easy to understand for you, and just a way of making something a little bit more extensible in WordPress. Anyway, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want more hints, tips, tricks about WordPress and other WordPress related stuff, and I'll hopefully see you soon in the next video.